Greetings, everyone. GleeCon here again with another episode of your favorite show, Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we did a little Let's Play where we saw the first base building mission of the Orcs, the Cry of the War Songs, and we saw Grommash Hellscream just sort of going ape, and we know that he's like, ooh, I think it's like the old days when we had demons around us. I don't know why that is the case, because I don't think there are any on Kalimdor. It might be because they're near the Well of Eternity. That might be what it's more about. But it also might be because demons are now on Azeroth. Stay a while and listen to the War of the Ancients. We read a trilogy on this. We've read tons of other Chronicles, but I think this is just Chronicles 3 recap of that. And this will get us up to speed, since on our very next episode, we're going to finally start having Night Elves in our gaming universe. The Night Elves were members of one of the oldest races in the world. Over 10,000 years ago, they built a glorious empire that reached the far corners of Azeroth's single landmass. This grand achievement was made possible only by the Well of Eternity, the mystical fount of arcane energy that was the lifeblood of Night Elven society. For generations, the Night Elves had experimented with the Well of Eternity. As they mastered its energies and unraveled the mysteries of the arcane, they became gifted and ambitious sorcerers. The greatest of these magic users were Queen Azshara and a sect of Night Elven society known as the Highborn. And later on we get I think they're called the Nightborn, right? One of the extra horde races. I think there's a direct correlation there, although we have yet to see where that comes from. Their unbridled pursuit of magic led to wondrous accomplishments, but it also brought their empire to ruin. In search of ever greater power, Azshara and the Highborn did the unthinkable. They made a pact with the Burning Legion and summoned demons into the world, just like the Lich King did, so it's not that unthinkable. I mean, although the Lich King was already a slave of Archimonde, well, of Sargeras, I think I heard on one video. I'll say Sargeras until the game beats it out of me, kind of like I did with Archimonde. Divisions formed among the Night Elves and a resistance emerged to banish the Legion from Azeroth. These brave Night Elves were joined by other native races, as well as by the ancient wild gods, primordial creatures who dwelled in the woodland deeps. The conflict that unfolded became known as the War of the Ancients. Amid the fighting, Illidan abandoned his allies and sided with the Legion. He believed that by feigning allegiance to the demons, he could gain unimaginable power and use it to destroy them. And in doing so, he would prove his greatness. Yeah, that was always kind of the fatal flaw of Illidan. Despite everything he did, even when he did it for good, he always had that streak of, like, self-aggrandizement that he can't overcome. Illidan's Stormrage did find power, but it came at a terrible price. His eyes were burned out and replaced with smoldering pits of magic, and his skin was scarred with fell tattoos. What was more, his fellow Night Elves saw him as a traitor. Well, yeah, and also, even at the end, if you remember the end of the War of the Ancients trilogy, it's not just that he tried to defeat them that way. When it was all said and done and they were giving him a second chance, he recreated the Well of Eternity because he basically said, even though we won, I don't think we've won for good. And I mean, I guess 10,000 years later, he's right. To cut off the Legion from the world and end the war, the Resistance launched an offensive against Azshara at the Well of Eternity itself. Sorry, it's the dog. The dog really wants to play right now. He just woke up. The subsequent battle caused the fount to unravel. He's still a puppy too. He's got all that energy. The Well of Eternity imploded, leading to a catastrophe known as the Great Sundering. If you're new to this show and you haven't heard one of my episodes where the dog's being a demon, this is the real Burning Legion right here. This guy. Okay. Tectonic plates buckled. Azeroth's sole landmass ripped apart into separate continents. The world changed forever. Sorry if I already read that. The Resistance fled to Hygel's summit to escape the devastation. When they arrived, they made a startling discovery. Illidan was already atop Hygel, and he had created a second Well of Eternity. And it kind of plays out a little bit less like it's a little bit different when we read in the book. They were already at like established a base camp. He kind of just slunk off to it at the top. It's not like he raced there and beat the whole refugees before them. Unbeknownst to the other Night Elves, he had gathered some of the original Well of Eternity's energies and used them to create a new well. Illidan believed that if the Legion ever returned to Azeroth, the Elves would need the Fount's magic to fend them off. More than his feigned allegiance to the Legion, it was this act that earned Illidan Stormrage the name Betrayer. Okay, there we go. So, what I just said before, they're just verifying here. Malfurion recommended that Illidan be locked away in a barrow prison to prevent him from doing any more damage to the rest of his people. Those barrow prisons, for those of you that play WoW, so annoying. I do like that at some point they added like these tiny little petals to serve as markers, because those are such confusing little places, and unless you're like a rogue or a druid, navigating them is always such a pain. You can get stuck down there for freaking hours. The Night Elves feared that the Legion might use the second Well of Eternity to invade the world again. These concerns were shared by the ancient dragon aspects. Alexstrasza, Ysera, and Nosdormu had learned of the new Fount, and they were determined to protect it. And why is Malygos already not mentioned? Because maybe he's already insane and rushed off. Alexstrasza planted an enchanted seed at the second Well of Eternity, which sprouted into a colossal world tree called Nordrassil. The tree acted as a cap over the Fount and prevented anyone from abusing its power. Okay, I got to have an aside here too, because Dragonflight's coming out in a few weeks, and they have that video, which the video has been out for a while, but I just watched it again the other day. And it's notable that there's no black dragons. If you watch the video, none of them are flying around. So even though there's a blue dragonflight that seems pretty vibrant in that video, and you see a large blue that's probably semi-aspect, we haven't caught up. The farthest we've done in the lore is that after Cataclysm, the aspects lost their power. They're not aspects anymore. And I can't remember. I haven't followed enough of the lore, even though I've played the expansions. I haven't run it over with a fine-tooth comb the way we've been doing all this stuff, so I don't know if they regain that power somehow. We kind of set the stage for that in the Dawn of the Aspects. But I wonder why there are just no good black dragons. I mean, Malygos went insane, and yet they somehow found a way. So the fact that, I don't know, we've got some lore and story to get there. I'm curious. I'm interested. The dragon aspects saw the Night Elves as the guardians of Nordrassil. To help them with this task, Alexstrasza and her allies infused the World Tree with potent enchantments. So long as Nordrassil stood, the Night Elves would enjoy immortality and immunity to disease and sickness. The World Tree would also act as a gateway to the Emerald Dream, allowing Malfurion and future druids an easier way to access the ethereal realm. Malfurion Stormrage spent most of his time training and leading new druids. They studied nature magic, and they dedicated themselves to maintaining the health and vitality of the wilds. Malfurion and the other druids often slumbered in the physical world while their spirits roamed the primal forests of the Emerald Dream. The task of leading Night Elven society fell to Tyrande Whisperwind. Gone were the days of empire building and reckless magic. Such pursuits had only led to death and ruin. Tyrande fostered a culture that was far more insular and cautious than before. The Night Elves kept to Hyjal's woodlands, only rarely straying into far-flung lands. To protect her borders, Tyrande forged a military order called the Sentinels. The force was mainly composed of Night Elf priestesses, many of them hardened veterans of the War of the Ancients. The Sentinels established outposts throughout Ashenvale and at the borders of Night Elven territory. And I think the Night Elves are the next chapter, and I believe when we do the Frozen Throne, the Sentinels, the first chapter is theirs as well. I also think it's interesting because the only thing we've seen so far of Tyrande is her role in War of the Ancients, where she's pretty innocent and nice and wholesome, and then that you see in the game where she is a fierce and sometimes ruthless leader. Defending the forests was not without its dangers, but the Sentinels could summon other creatures for aid. Sometimes they would awaken the druids from their sojourns in the Emerald Dream, or call on the Fey spirits who dwelled in the wilds. The woodlands teemed with these potential allies: fierce chimeras, fairy dragons, wise treants, dryads, and the ancient keepers of the grove. By far the most powerful of these creatures was a wild god known as Cenarius. He had taught Night Elves the art of druidism, and he cared deeply for their well-being and prosperity. Cenarius shared the Night Elves' quest to protect Nordrassil in the Second Well of Eternity. He had fought in the War of the Ancients, he had seen his fellow wild gods ripped apart by demons, he had witnessed the forests burning in towering walls of fell fire. Cenarius knew that to prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again, the elves and the forest spirits needed to work in unison. And with Cenarius' help, they did. The Night Elves and woodland creatures overcame every foe that threatened their lands. This vigil did not extend to the eastern kingdoms. Tyrande Whisperwind and her people were partially aware of events transpiring across the Great Sea, but they rarely intervened. When they did, their activities were always subtle and unseen. The Druids were the first to notice the plague of undeath killing the wilds as it spread across the eastern kingdoms. From within the Emerald Dream, their spirits reached out to the physical world to stop the blight, yet they had little success. Some of these Druids told Tyrande of what was happening. Though she maintained her isolationism, she sensed a familiar force at work behind the plague. She sensed the Legion. All right, so that kind of sets us up for how they're going to get involved. But it's also just nestled in here because they're coming up soon, but it doesn't tie directly into the levels that we're going to be doing with the orcs. So we've got some more Chronicles coming up before we do our next Let's Plays. Okay, this episode is in the pipe, 5x5. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, for listening, for riding out with my squeaky puppy. And I look forward to seeing everybody next time on more of Warcraft.